The courtroom was electric, the air heavy with anticipation. The audience settled into their seats, murmurs of excitement flowing through the crowd. Today's case was bound to be something special. The bailiff's voice echoed in the room as he called the next case, Barrows versus Crawford. The defendant, Tina Barrows, the wife of a well-known senator, was about to face one of the toughest judges in the country, and no one was sure if she was ready for it. Tina walked into the courtroom with the confident stride of someone used to getting their way. She was dressed in a designer suit, her heels clicking against the floor with every step. Her blonde hair cascaded perfectly over her shoulders, styled just so, as if she were ready for a photo shoot rather than a courtroom battle. There was no sign of worry on her face, no sense of apprehension about what was to come. To Tina, this was just another obstacle to overcome, an obstacle she believed would fall easily before her. She took her seat in the defendant's chair, her posture straight and proud, her arms crossed as if she were already in control of the situation. Tina glanced at the gallery of people who had come to watch the proceedings. Many of them were there for the same reason. This wasn't just a courtroom case, this was a show, a spectacle to be witnessed. Tina Barrows, after all, was no ordinary defendant. She was the wife of Senator Gregory Barrows, a man whose political influence stretched across state lines. She had always walked through life with the sense that she was untouchable, that the rules didn't apply to her in the same way they applied to others. Today, however, she was facing something she hadn't anticipated, a judge who could tear apart the most sophisticated defense with the flick of her wrist. Across the room, James Crawford, a disabled veteran of the Iraq War, sat quietly in his seat. His hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the chronic pain that had become his constant companion since his time in service. He had fought for his country, serving with pride and honor, and yet here he was, fighting another battle, a battle for justice, not just for himself, but for other veterans like him who had been disregarded and mistreated by people who thought their power and influence could shield them from accountability. James had come to Judge Judy's courtroom hoping to settle a long-standing dispute with Tina Barrows and her husband's office. It wasn't just a simple case of property damage or a disagreement over money, this was about respect. About dignity. He had been trying to secure the medical benefits owed to him as a disabled veteran for months, but when he reached out for help from Senator Barrows' office, he was ignored. Worse yet, he was threatened by Tina herself, told that he was wasting her time, and that men like him should be grateful for the benefits they received. Tina had used her husband's political influence to silence James Crawford and intimidate him into backing down. But she hadn't counted on one thing, Judge Judy. A woman with decades of experience sitting at the bench, a woman who had seen it all, fraud, manipulation, and intimidation. And Judge Judy, unlike Tina, wasn't easily swayed by power or social status. She had spent decades dismantling lies and deceit, and now, Tina Barrows was about to find that out the hard way. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as Judge Judy entered. She didn't need to announce her presence, it was felt the moment she stepped into the room. With her commanding presence and no-nonsense demeanor, Judge Judy exuded authority. She didn't make a grand entrance, nor did she waste time with pleasantries. As she took her seat at the bench, her eyes scanned the room, locking briefly with Tina Barrows before moving to James Crawford. There was a quiet yet undeniable power in the way she carried herself, an air of someone who had seen it all and was ready to make the final call. Let's begin. Judge Judy's voice cut through the room with a sharp precision that immediately commanded everyone's attention. Tina sat up straighter, her posture slightly adjusting as she prepared to speak. She smiled, smugly, arrogantly, as she leaned forward, ready to deliver what she believed was a solid defense. "I'm suing Mr. Crawford," Tina began, her voice dripping with entitlement. "He is making ridiculous claims against me and my husband. All this is another ploy to get money from me. I don't know how he expects to win, but I'm confident I'll walk out of here with my reputation intact." Judge Judy's eyebrows rose ever so slightly, the slightest shift that signaled she had already taken note of Tina's attitude. She didn't speak yet. Instead, she nodded at Tina to continue. Tina's tone became even more condescending as she continued, recounting the events leading up to the lawsuit. Her version of the story painted her as a victim of a man who was clearly exploiting the system for his own gain. She glossed over the threats and insults she had hurled at James Crawford, focusing instead on his supposed disrespect towards her and her husband. She recited legal jargon, relying on her self-made Google degree to strengthen her argument, but it only made her sound more out of touch. As Tina spoke, Judge Judy's sharp gaze never left her. Her silence was more powerful than any words could be. She let Tina finish her diatribe, all the while observing her every movement, every facial expression, and every carefully chosen word. Finally, once Tina had finished speaking, Judge Judy slowly shifted in her chair, her gaze unwavering. She looked at Tina for a long moment before speaking in a calm but firm tone, the kind of tone that instantly sets the tone for the rest of the trial. "Miss Barrows," Judge Judy said, her voice crisp and authoritative, "I don't have time for your theatrics. You've made some serious accusations here, but none of them hold any weight. So let's get to the facts, shall we?" The room seemed to hold its breath as Tina's smug expression faltered for just a fraction of a second. The power in Judge Judy's voice had done what Tina had never expected, it had disarmed her. She wasn't going to control this room. And in that moment, Tina Barrows' facade of invincibility began to crack. It was going to be a long, eye-opening day for her. The courtroom was silent except for the occasional shuffle of papers and the soft hum of the cameras rolling. Judge Judy had already begun her cross-examination, and Tina was about to realize that her carefully constructed story was beginning to unravel. "Let's get one thing straight, Miss Barrows," Judge Judy began, her tone icy but composed. "You've come in here today with your designer clothes and your political connections, but what you fail to understand is that this courtroom is about facts, not power, not privilege, and certainly not about who you think you are." Tina's confident smirk wavered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered, trying to maintain her composure. She leaned forward slightly, ready to respond. "I understand that, Your Honor. But this entire case is about someone trying to manipulate the system for his own gain." "I'm simply defending myself," Tina said, her voice laced with defensiveness. Judge Judy let out a small, almost imperceptible sigh before flipping through the papers on her desk. It was clear she wasn't buying Tina's defense. She didn't need to. She had already seen the cracks in Tina's story before the woman even walked into the courtroom. "This time, you're going to face the consequences of your actions." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Tina sat frozen, her body stiff with the realization that there was nowhere left to hide. "You've played the system, Miss Barrows," Judge Judy continued. "You've made a career out of playing the victim, and you've done it at the expense of hardworking people. But that's not going to happen here. Not today." Judge Judy raised one hand, gesturing to the bailiff, who stepped forward with another set of documents. Tina's stomach sank as she saw the bailiff hand the papers over to the judge. These weren't just any papers, these were the final pieces of evidence that would seal her fate. "I want you to take a good look at these, Miss Barrows." Judge Judy slid the documents in front of Tina, making sure she saw every word. "These are the financial records I've gathered on you. Every settlement payment you've ever received, every business you've extorted, and every fraudulent claim you've made. The pattern is as clear as day." Tina could feel the room spinning around her. She had always prided herself on being able to manipulate situations to her advantage. She had worked the system for years, always one step ahead. But this time, she had met her match. "And here's the best part," Judge Judy said with a knowing smile. "I've spoken to the victims of your scams. People who had their businesses ruined by you. I've got testimonials from gym owners, restaurant owners, and shopkeepers who all had to pay you off just to make the nightmare stop. They didn't have the resources to fight back, but I'm going to make sure that stops right here." Tina's face had gone completely white. She had thought she could control the situation, that her connection to powerful people would get her out of this mess. But now she saw that all of it had been for nothing. Judge Judy had laid everything out, everything Tina had done, and there was no way out. "And now," Judge Judy said with a calm that made the entire courtroom hold its breath, "we come to the most important part of this case. The part where I hand down the consequences of your actions." The words hung in the air for a moment, and Tina's chest tightened as she realized just how much trouble she was in. She had never expected things to go this way. She had expected a quick win, a pat on the back from her husband, and another check in her bank account. Instead, she was about to lose everything. "The case is simple, Miss Barrows," Judge Judy continued, her eyes never leaving Tina. "You lied, you manipulated the system, and you ruined people's lives for your own gain." The weight of those words felt like a physical blow. Tina had no more words to offer. No rebuttals. No justifications. She had been caught, and there was no escaping the truth. Judge Judy was going to hold her accountable. "I find in favor of the defendant," Judge Judy declared, the finality of her voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "And Miss Barrows, you will pay for your fraud." Tina didn't even have time to react before Judge Judy finished the sentence that would change her life forever. "The total damages are $250,000. You will also be banned from filing any further lawsuits under fraudulent pretenses, and you will be required to pay for the legal fees of every single business you've extorted." The room was still. For Tina, the world had come to a crashing halt. The smug confidence that had once filled her had been completely wiped away. She had been exposed for the fraud she truly was. "And there's more, Miss Barrows," Judge Judy said, her tone still calm but full of authority. "You're also going to be referred to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. The evidence suggests that you've committed fraud, extortion, and conspiracy, and I'm not going to let you get away with it any longer." The reality of what had just been said hit Tina like a freight train. Her life as she knew it was over. She could feel her legs shaking beneath her as the weight of the consequences crashed down on her. The words Judge Judy had just spoken hung in the air, suffocating Tina Barrows. For a moment, time seemed to stand still in that courtroom, as if reality itself was on pause, waiting for the inevitable collapse that was sure to come. Tina couldn't breathe. Her mind raced to process what had just happened. The shame, the fear, and the panic all hit her at once. She had never imagined this would be the outcome. She thought she could charm her way out, that her position, her connections, her manipulative, well-practiced words, would carry her through. But here she was, caught in a trap of her own making, standing before the most formidable judge on television, who had not only exposed her but also dismantled her entire life. The courtroom was dead silent. All eyes were on Tina, and she could feel the weight of every single gaze on her. The shame was unbearable. Her face flushed a deep red, then drained of color, as she realized the gravity of what had just been laid down. $250,000. Criminal investigation. Legal fees. She had spent years climbing, exploiting, and manipulating her way to the top, but in the span of mere moments, she had lost it all. Her future, her reputation, shattered. "Miss Barrows," Judge Judy's voice broke through the tension like a clap of thunder. Tina snapped her head up to face the judge, who was now speaking with a deliberate calmness. "You've spent years exploiting people's kindness, their hard work, and their vulnerabilities. You've been nothing more than a parasite." The word stung, cutting deep into Tina. She had prided herself on being clever, on being able to manipulate those around her with ease. But now, here she was, humiliated, vulnerable, and exposed for the world to see. Judge Judy continued, her eyes locking onto Tina with an unwavering intensity. "This isn't just about money, Miss Barrows. It's about principle. It's about what happens when someone like you takes advantage of the system, when someone like you thinks they can break the law with impunity, and that there won't be any consequences. Well, now you're going to see just how serious those consequences are." Judge Judy's words were chilling. Tina wanted to speak, to plead, to try and wiggle her way out of this, but she couldn't find her voice. She sat frozen, her body stiff, her hands clenched at her sides as she waited for the final judgment to fall. You'll be required to pay restitution to every business you've wronged, Judge Judy said, delivering the blow that Tina had feared most. Every single business you've extorted and destroyed will be compensated for your actions. And those businesses? They have a right to fight back. Tina's mind flashed back to the numerous businesses she had targeted over the years, small, immigrant-owned businesses that had been too afraid to fight back, too overwhelmed by her intimidation tactics to stand up to her. It was all coming back to her now, the long list of businesses that had paid her off just to make her go away. She had destroyed them, and now, she was about to face the consequences of her actions. But the final words were the ones that hit the hardest, the ones that would haunt Tina for the rest of her life. "Miss Barrows," Judge Judy said, her voice sharp and unwavering. "You've committed fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. You've weaponized the very laws that were meant to protect people. And because of that, you will not be able to escape the legal consequences. You will pay for your crimes, and you will face a public reckoning." Tina felt the world closing in around her. The tears she had fought so hard to hold back began to burn in her eyes. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold on to her dignity, but it was impossible. She had lost everything. The life she had worked so hard to build, gone in a matter of minutes. She felt the weight of her own guilt crushing her. She had betrayed people. She had taken their money, their livelihoods, and she had used the law as a weapon. But the moment that felt the most unbearable was the one where she realized that her disgrace would now be public, broadcast for the world to see. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with Tina. "Your actions were despicable. And now, you'll spend the rest of your life cleaning up the mess you've made. You're not just facing financial ruin, you're facing a criminal record. You're facing consequences that will haunt you for the rest of your days." The courtroom was completely still. There were no gasps, no murmurs, just the heavy silence that accompanied the finality of Judge Judy's words. Tina could hardly breathe. Every piece of her life, every illusion of control, had shattered in those few moments of absolute, unrelenting judgment. "Court is adjourned," Judge Judy said, her voice a final command that rang through the courtroom. She rose from her seat and began to walk out, her demeanor calm, her authority absolute. The bailiff stepped forward, signaling the end of the session. Tina remained in her seat for a moment, unable to move. Her entire body felt frozen, as though the reality of what had just transpired was too much to comprehend all at once. But there was no escaping it. Tina Barrows, the woman who had once walked into that courtroom with a sense of entitlement and superiority, now sat with her head bowed in defeat, the weight of her crimes weighing heavily on her shoulders. The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of the gavel, which came down with finality. Tina Barrows was still sitting, dazed, her world having completely collapsed around her. It was the worst kind of defeat, not just a loss in court, but the unraveling of everything she had built through lies, manipulation, and exploitation. Judge Judy's voice rang out once again, this time addressing the courtroom as a whole. "Ladies and gentlemen, I hope today serves as a reminder that no one is above the law," she began, her tone resolute. Tina Barrows thought she could use the law as a weapon. She thought she could play the system for her own gain. But today, we saw the law work exactly as it was meant to, it caught up with her. The camera zoomed in on Tina, still sitting in her seat, her face pale and tear-streaked. She had become a symbol of everything wrong with entitlement, someone who thought their privilege could shield them from the consequences of their actions. But the truth was undeniable. Tina Barrows had been caught. And today, she would pay. Judge Judy paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. The courtroom audience, as usual, remained seated, but the air was thick with a kind of quiet reverence. It was as if everyone knew that the moment they had just witnessed was not just another case on Judge Judy's docket, it was an example. A powerful reminder that even the most powerful, the most entitled, could not escape the full weight of justice. Turning to Tina, Judge Judy's expression softened ever so slightly, but her voice still carried the weight of years of experience. "Miss Barrows, I've seen many people like you in my career. People who think they can exploit the law, people who believe they can use the system to hurt others for their own personal gain. She shook her head. But here's the thing. You weren't just targeting individuals, Miss Barrows. You were targeting vulnerable people, small business owners, immigrants, families who had built their lives from the ground up. You were stealing from them. The words hit Tina like a physical blow. She had spent years convincing herself that she was somehow above the consequences of her actions. She had justified her behavior by thinking that the businesses she targeted were just nameless, faceless entities that didn't matter. But now, she saw the full extent of the damage she had caused. She had destroyed families, driven people to despair, and ruined the livelihoods of those who had trusted her. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed, and her next words were deliberate. I want to make one thing absolutely clear, Miss Barrows, you will not walk away from this. Not with your wealth. Not with your social status. And certainly not with your dignity. She leaned forward slightly, her voice now low and measured. The judgment today is just the beginning of the consequences you'll face. The weight of Judge Judy's words wasn't lost on anyone. Tina could feel the sting of truth in every syllable. There was no escaping the inevitable. No way to slither out of the trap she had set for herself. Tina Barrows had been a predator, and now, she would face the full fury of justice. You are ordered to pay restitution to every business you've wronged, Judge Judy continued, her voice firm. And that's just the financial side of it. The criminal investigation into your actions is underway. The fraud, the extortion, the emotional devastation you caused these people, those are all criminal offenses. And make no mistake, Miss Barrows, you will face the legal consequences of those crimes. Tina shook her head, her tears now flowing freely. She could feel the room closing in around her, as though the very walls were suffocating her. She had always thought she could outsmart the system. She had always believed that her money and connections could shield her from the consequences of her actions. But now, as the weight of Judge Judy's words bore down on her, she realized how wrong she had been. Judge Judy's voice softened, just for a moment, but the finality was unmistakable. Miss Barrows, there's a lesson here for all of us. You've spent your life thinking that you could take and take without ever giving anything back. But there's always a price. And today, you're paying that price. For the first time in years, Tina didn't know what to say. There were no more lies, no more manipulations. The reality of her situation had fully settled in, and she had no defense. She had thought she was smarter than everyone else, more capable of bending the rules in her favor. But now, she had been exposed as nothing more than a fraud, a predator who had destroyed lives for personal gain. Judge Judy's gavel came down with the final, unassailable strike. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. And Miss Barrows, I trust you'll remember this lesson for the rest of your life: no one is above the law. Not even you. As the courtroom slowly began to empty, Tina remained seated, her head hung low. She had no idea what would happen next. But she knew one thing for sure: her life had changed forever. She had spent years evading the consequences of her actions, but now the time had come. The moment of reckoning had arrived.